What is happening? Welcome to another episode of On the Corner. My name is Nick Pollack. Today, we are going to talk about our mock draft that we did. The Pitcherless Podcast Network did our mock draft that we do every single year in a 12-teamer, 5x5 from different people across our podcast network to do these podcasts and talk about all 276 players who were drafted in this really fun format over the next 2 months. And joining me today, you might know him from Keep or Cut with People. It is the great Chad Young. Chad, so good to see you, man.
I mean, at best, I'm like a pretty good Chad Young. I don't know about great. That's a lot to live up to.
You've been doing this for years. Obviously, fantastic auto new work over at Fangraphs as well. But yeah, it's how was your year with Keep or Cut this season?
It was good. I had a sort of a disastrous fantasy year. Like it just everything went sort of wrong, but
sure.
That creates a lot of fodder for podcasts. Like,
well, right.
What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? So
exactly that stuff is great. And really what is so fun about this one specifically, this draft, is we get an early ADP. For just an understanding of what are the decisions. We're going to do a couple more among the staff this offseason to have a more complete 12-teamer ADP, because let's be honest, guys, if you're using ADP that's on the NFBC website, it is doing you a disservice, and that those weights actually matter, which is so wrong. And if you're unaware of this, those are draft and hold formats. Those are not your standard leagues. Thus, the ADPs are going to be more so for your draft and hold. That is, you're not having the burn and churn. You're not having the 12-teamer situation, a smaller draft pool, etc. And the strategies for both, that is draft and hold, and you want those volume guys so much more than you want to take the higher riskier guys, versus 12-teamers where you actually do want to really lean into a lot of the riskier picks because you have such a full waiver wire. It really does affect ADP, and you have to be very, very careful using NFBC, especially right now in November, and be aware of the weights it will have on future ADP, because there is a bias from those. Okay, so we did this one. Chad took pick number, I think that's 8, if I got this right, looking at the board. You can see, of course, below, you'll be able to get the draft board and our article covering the mock drafts in review. So Chad, talk us through pick number 8 and why you chose that one and what your strategy was going into this as the 8th pick off the board.
Yeah. So part of the reason I picked that is I was relatively late to the game to picking my pick. And so a lot of the other ones were gone. I really wanted to pick, honestly, more like where you were. You picked 6th, and I would have liked to have been there, because I like when I look at the top of the draft board, I really see 6 to 7 guys I feel good about taking early. And I like, I wanted to be at the end of that group. I also, for me, as a mock draft, there was part of me was like, okay, so 8 isn't really where I'd want to be. I think typically if I wasn't going to be in that top 6, I'd want to be at the end of the first round, sort of as late as possible.
Sure.
And so instead I was like, you know what, 8 to me felt like maybe not a worst case scenario, but one of the harder spots to draft from this year. And so I was like, I'm going to take that and just see what happens, see how it plays out. If I don't end up, because I do think if I look towards the end of the first round, and, I'm sure we'll get into who was taken where, but I think like the guys taken between 10 and 15, I'd generally prefer to have 2 of those guys than to be around the 8th pick. Although the way this played out this year, I'm pretty intrigued by what I did in the first 2 rounds. So I think I'm pretty happy with where I ended up at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm trying, I do every single year. I establish like the baseline of hitters. And if you guys know me, I know you're going to be so sick of this. I wait on pitching, shocking. And I really push myself in mine. It's just to see, cool, I won't do it for 8 rounds and see what happens. But what I do is I say, great, I got to have my different tiers of hitters for 1, 2, 3, 4 groups, essentially. And I will adjust to a pitcher if I feel as if I don't have any of those options, as if all of the really good hitters are just kind of gone. Then I'll say, fine, then I'll take that ace. But this year I'm in around, I wouldn't say Vlad Jr. is part of my crew of hitters. I don't think. We'll see. Maybe I don't know. I haven't really done enough on Vlad Jr., but my instinct is that Freddie Freeman inside that entire first round And Acuna just actually came out, I think, yesterday to say, or like the GM said that he won't be ready for opening day, which is very frustrating. And you would think he's limited with the knee on stolen bases like he was versus the 40-70 season. But I'd probably say that there are 13 to 14 guys that I'd be really happy with, which means that maybe I'm leaning toward the back end of the first for that reason. But your strategy here, you took the juniors. You went with Tatis and then Acuna. Quickly, was there a positional thought pattern? Was there a pitching versus hitting process that you were hoping to adhere to as well from the 8th spot?
Yeah. So going into this draft, my thinking on hitting versus pitching was actually that I was going to push pitchers up a little bit. And that was a conscious decision to A, do something I normally wouldn't do, but B, to zag when I expected everyone else to zig, or zig when I expected everyone else to zag, right? I think your position on waiting on pitching is not entirely unique within the community of podcasters that we're going to be doing this draft.
Absolutely.
And so my thinking was by, I don't know, let's say by the 8th, 9th, 10th round, somewhere in that area, I wanted to have a pretty good core of starting pitching that I was excited about, because I thought there was be an opportunity to build a relatively elite pitching staff without overpaying, because other people would let pitchers fall to me. But I don't believe there are any pitchers I feel great about taking in the first 2 rounds. And so my expectation was I was going to go hitter, and not necessarily immediately go pitcher, but go hitter, and then be evenly split hitter pitcher for the next 6 to 8 rounds.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you did adhere to that. It looks like. And about Tatis Jr. and Ronald Acuna Jr., I mean, is there anything you really wanted to add on those two? I feel as if we don't really need to spend too much time on those top hitters, because I mean, Tatis is great. You know, he's going to be great. If you feel like he's going to replicate exactly what he did with his obvious power, speed, floor, that's great. Acuna Jr., we didn't know the status of opening day. I remember actually, I had him. I was debating between him, Soto, Kyle Tucker, and Betts for my personal one. So I just see him go all the way there. I was actually wondering if he would come back to me 2 picks later in the second round.
I felt the same. I preferred Tatis to Acuna, so I didn't have a hard time making that choice in the first round, but I was sort of shocked that he kept falling.
Right.
I assume that the injury risk, the injury concern is part of that. To some extent, I baked that in, and we were drafting this for a head-to-head format. Like, I don't really care if he's available for opening day. I mean, I do. It doesn't help that he's not, but if he misses a month and as a result I go 0-4 to start the season, that's probably a worst case scenario. Like, if my team actually goes 0-4, it's probably because it wasn't good and Acuna wasn't going to save me. If I go 1-3, 2-2, it's not going to drastically crush my chances of making the playoffs. And the funny thing is, like, I've actually been relatively low on Tatis just because he's struggled coming back. But after this most recent injury, he came back, and down the stretch this year, he was incredible. He was great in the playoffs. And so to me, this was, I'm going to take these 2 guys, and there's some risk baked in there. There's also, like, they could be 2 of the top 5 guys in fantasy this year. Like that. And I felt like both at the 8th pick, Tatis was the last guy left that I was like, who could still jump up and be the number 1 fantasy player this year? And he was the only one left who I felt like could do that. And when I got to Acuna, it was who could jump up and be a top 5, top 10 type guy. And there's a couple other guys. Carroll, you could make a case for. I think you could make a case for, Skeens being a top 5, top 10 fantasy player, but I wasn't going to take a pitcher. But Acuna was the other guy that I was like, there's a possibility by the time the playoffs roll around for fantasy, I'm just sitting there going, I'm starting Acuna and Tatis. What are you doing?
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. 3rd and 4th round, I really want to say 3rd, 4th, and 5th, you really hit the The pitchers, I would say third and fourth are Chris Sale and Logan Gilbert. And I hadn't actually put out my top 200. If you guys didn't know, I've been really, really bad. Of course, you know that I have not published mine because, of course, I'm writing like 20,000 words and like I'm an idiot. And when I get so close to finishing and really pushing through it, other things happen. First Pitch Arizona just happened over the weekend. There are a couple other projects I'm working on that I need to get done. And good news is that I'm like right at the finish line finally. So I just need to put in like another hour or two and it should get done, which means I'm going to find a way to get that done today. So yes, I am promising that I'll have it done. Editing wise, I don't know, but this wasn't out for everybody. And I'm not going to say that everybody just would normally follow my rankings or something like that for this. However, I feel as if there are a fair number of ranks, or at least the ADP of pitchers here that go against the grain heavily of what I would be doing personally. And I would say that Chris Sale in the third round is certainly one of them for me, as I am far lower. Logan Gilbert, pretty standard affair. I don't feel we need to talk too much about him unless you have a lot of thoughts there. Really good slider. Amazing extension, should be there again. Four-seam can be better. Hopefully the secondaries catch up too, especially the cutter with Gilbert, but it's just a really great safe floor. I have him around 9 or 10. But Chris Sale, talk to me about him a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this is, I will say more about this, but I think there's more required of people who are low on Sale to justify why they're low on him than there is for me to justify. Like, he was the number 2 pitcher in fantasy this year.
Yeah.
And his, there's a sense of like, he missed all this time and he's had injury issues and he's not young. And so you have to worry about that. But, going back to the beginning of his career, there are all these injury issues. He's been remarkably healthy for most of his career. And he had this sort of weird stretch where he missed 2020. He barely pitched in 2021, 2022. Then he came back last year and was good, but clearly working his way back. And he was great again this year. And I don't think, like, if it were if I were drafting a keeper league, which is mostly what I do, if I were in a keeper league, I'm much lower on him because he's 35 now. He'll be 36 right around opening day. At some point, you're going to get stuck holding the bag on Sale for sure. But I didn't see anything in his year this year that looked unrealistic, unsustainable, can't be continued. Could I be wrong? Could age catch up with him right now? Sure. But he was the number 2 pitcher in fantasy. And to me, he was to me the clear end of the top tier.
Sure. Of the abilities of the top guys would be Chris Sale. Yeah. I guess what I would throw at you is that he didn't even finish the year healthy with Atlanta. And as far as regression expected, I mean, this fastball performance was way fortunate in his favor. That should regress. The changeup wasn't as consistent as you want it to be. It was a really fastball slider that really made it work. And the fastball is not really back to what it used to be. It had a lot of success, but it was at 95 or so, not like the 96, 97 we've seen from peak Sale prior to 2020. And yeah, I mean, I think it's not fair to say that Chris Sale is healthier than Jacob deGrom, for example. Just because the end of the season hurt, and Chris Sale, I know, just had this season, but the history of Chris Sale is very much of a hurt one for the past 5-6 years. So I can't say A, I see the regression, B, the skills are not as good as deGrom, and I think others as well. C, I think it's just going to be worse as the decline as he gets with age too. I'm not saying I don't like Chris Sale. I have him, I think, at the end of teens. He's in the end of the aces tier, but it very much seemed like a peak season where I would just rather go for guys that I'm like, cool, I know I'm going to get more with also that still high ceiling.
Yeah, I think from a ceiling perspective, I think that might be where we. And deGrom is a fair
ceiling is why I'm going for, because even though he just did it for a year, we've seen that before of guys just having this like, whoa, this is an amazing. I mean, Ronaldo Lopez does not have a ceiling of a 2 ERA over 135 innings next year. We're not going to.
Yeah, I think that's
that, right?
That's fair. I think the difference with Sale is it's not like this is something he hasn't done before. He is clearly one of, at his best, a truly elite pitcher and has been for a long time. And
Sure.
so I get what you're saying about like the risk baked in and the concerns about regression. I think it is a riskier pick than some of the guys that went after him. But I think he's got upside that they don't.
Cool. All right. So going to the fifth round, Josh Naylor had an amazing season. I think it was 37 home runs or so, as a first baseman for Cleveland. Now I do want to mention, especially for left-handed bats in Cleveland, the home run park factor was absurd, as they had changed some seating in the bleachers that changed the wind patterns, and then all of a sudden allowed that ball to go out to right field a lot easier than usual. Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez, for example, are massive benefactors of this. And I don't know if that's going to change yet for next year. Assuming that it changes, would you still be on Josh Naylor and in the fifth round? But otherwise, I mean, first basemen are not great in drafts this year. I think I got the last one I'm really okay with. Maybe Vinny Pascantino in the 8th round. Okay, cool. Everything's fine. But and Christian Walker, I got in the 7th round. You got Josh Naylor in the 5th. Was this a pick that you're super stoked about, or was it, all right, I just got to do this?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, I was at that point in the draft, I was sort of surprised when I looked at my first base list remaining and was like, oh God, this isn't fun at all. But I also, Naylor he had a particularly low BABIP last year, 246. He is not a historically low BABIP guy. He's not a high BABIP guy. He's run a 282 career BABIP. What he did do is he pulled up that home run per fly ball rate. I don't think those changes in Cleveland are going to go away. And so I think that there's good reason to think that he can keep that power and have some more batted ball benefit go his way on balls that don't get over the fence.
Sure.
And so I actually think there's a little bit of upside beyond what he just did. But even beyond that, even besides that, like his WRC plus last 3 years is 118, 127, 118. Like, he's just been a very steady, solid producer at, as you said, a position that suddenly doesn't feel very exciting. And so I sort of looked at him and was like, man, if that power sticks around and his batted ball luck bounces back a little bit, this could get real interesting. And even if that power doesn't stick around, or he does get the batted ball, like even only one of those two things happens, he's going to continue to be a really productive player. So I also think the Guardians lineup will be better around him next year. And maybe that's me being a homer and having some hopes, but Quan missed some time, which really hurt that lineup and hurt Naylor in particular in terms of RBIs and things like that. By the end of the season, Manzardo was hitting second in that lineup. And I think Quan, Manzardo, Ramirez, Naylor is going to help him quite a bit versus the guys that they were trying to slot into that second slot earlier. I also think there's a chance he gets traded, which gave me some like just a little bit of pause, but the David Fry news we just got that he's having elbow surgery and is going to miss a bunch of time may have prevented that from happening. Because I think part of the thinking was, well, Fry has to DH and you got Manzardo coming. You've got to figure out what to do here, and they need to get off of those corner bats and into like an outfield bat or something like that. But that's no longer the case because Fry's not going to be there for probably the first third to half of the season, something like that.
So with Josh Naylor, I do want to mention for those that are wondering, well, the BABIP went down, but he had a lot more home runs. If the Bacon, that's batting average and contact, also followed suit, it did. It was 9th percentile BABIP, about 24th percentile on Bacon. So that should hopefully answer any sort of questions you have there about Naylor. Now, was there an injury with Josh Naylor about halfway through the year, around August or so? Or is there not? Because when it comes to his process plus over the season, what it looks like is by the second half, he really focused on contact again versus power. In the first half of the year, it was very much power is the focus. Contact went down significantly, but then the second half, you reversed it, trying to cut back on the strikeouts, trying to focus more on just getting contact. But overall, it meant the power went way south as he hit far fewer home runs in that second half. So generally, you see that happen when there is some sort of wrist injury, something affecting them that prevents them from power, and then they realize, okay, I need to just focus on hitting the ball as opposed to actually putting everything into it. But that is a little concerning that the power just kind of got sapped in the second half of this year. Now, of course, the average did go up. And really, again, how am I knowing this about Josh Naylor so quickly? Because, again, Nick is not a hitting guy. It's, of course, PL Pro's hitting rolling charts. It's the best thing ever. You just go to PLV apps and hit a rolling charts, the first one, and you can see this gorgeous Process Plus chart, which essentially has everything you can talk about, from any contact stat or power stat, decision stat you want. Every stat we utilize when we talk about players is represented in one of those three and in Process Plus. So I highly, highly recommend using this for your analysis. All right. So going to the sixth round, it's Dylan Cease. Essentially, I imagine he is to you who he is, right? Nothing really that new. I could talk a long time about how he needs a cutter because his volatility is, I believe, focused on his inability to have anything else outside of his fastball against lefties. And sometimes he throws it in the middle. Sometimes he throws it up properly. Sometimes the slider does help out, but he needs a cutter so badly against lefties. So what did he add? A sweeper this year, which makes no sense. But he still did really well against righties. It's a good situation for him. Sixth round, you're just saying, look, I want 225 strikeouts and call it a day.
Yeah. And I think, all the things that you've been saying about improvements he could make are all upside potential, right? There's he did go out and add a pitch. Maybe it wasn't the right pitch, but if he's still looking for things that work, maybe this year he does add the right pitch. Maybe he makes one more change. Maybe he makes that tweak. But yeah, I think it's sort of, he's going to go out there and pile up some good numbers for me inning after inning after inning in a good situation to pitch, and I'll take it.
Yep. All right. We're going to move on to rounds 7 and onward. We're going to do that after this break. All right. So we have Junior Caminero in the 7th round. Talk to me more about Junior, as obviously it's his rookie year. How is the season going, and what do you see for him in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest version of the Junior Caminero story is that he's an elite prospect who, at 20 years old, turned 21 in season 2021. At 21 years old, we'll say, was already an above average bat. Like that's the simplest thing, and guys who are that good that young tend to get better. He doesn't have a big strikeout issue. He walks not a ton, but a decent amount. He had a 116 max EV. He had a double-digit barrel rate. He has a high hard hit rate. Like all those sort of underlying skills you want to see. And I know you're going to tell me the PLV stuff in a moment, but all the underlying stuff you want to see.
Why aren't you using it, Chad? You get it. You're a staffer.
I don't want to give you nothing to talk about. So,
but that's just stop it, Chad. No, I don't want to. I'm saying, great, sounds awesome. Move on to the next.
It wasn't what I looked at with him. For me, especially with young players like this, I tend to. I'm buying into the skills and believing that he can improve the approach. And I'm hopeful what you're going to tell me right now is the approach is great already. But I think there's a ton of talent here, and I think. I'll take my shot on the 21-year-old who was already that good with such strong underlying talent.
Sure. He swings a lot.
Yeah.
Like a lot. And what that means is that you have bad decision value. This is a very typical thing of a young rookie, is being swing out of his shoes and everything. Now, a lot of young rookies are super athletic, like Caminero is, thus he can adjust and make contact still. And that's what he did. You can have a terrible decision value as long as not that you just make contact, but you also have power. If you just make contact, then you're just seeing yourself into outs.
Right.
That's not good either. You need to be able to pair that with power, and it's not exceptional on either contact or power through the rolling chart. I'm seeing through essentially just in the month of September. Is that right with Caminero? Have we barely seen him? I think
He
all
was
I'm
in
getting is from the
43 games, got
yeah. So
177 plate
so it's
appearances.
very typical coming up and just doing the man. I could have sworn he did more, but right, because it was just that kind of season for him. They waited so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping that the decision value goes up. It could just be something that is a product of just jumping into the majors. Swing rate was super high at 47 or 48%. Oh boy. I just half the pitches he saw pretty much just swung at.
Yeah.
So hopefully that develops, but obviously there is talent here. Being able to still make that contact and power is a big deal, and you do expect to see some sort of growth with regular playing time for Caminero. Also, when it comes to third base, this might be the I don't know. I mean, Eugenio Suarez in the 17th round is an absolute steal because getting out of Seattle is a huge deal. And that's an absolute seal of approval there for On the Wire. I was really excited to get Mark Vientos earlier in the same round, and I was debating between Vientos and Lewis for like 3 rounds. I got Lewis, but then I was like, all right, well, I'm getting Vientos anyway because I need to ensure that when Royce Lewis gets hurt, I have something, and he went right before me. Were you essentially circling third base at this time, or who would your backup third baseman be?
Boy, my backup, if I didn't get Caminero, I probably would have been waiting on maybe Suarez, maybe Jake Berger, like somebody who'd give me something, right? Like go get a big power bat, even if they don't do a whole lot else, just to fill that position with something productive. I think those are the 2 guys that sort of jump out at me. I'm intrigued by Connor Norby, but I'm not that excited about him. Honestly, my backup to Caminero when I was looking at this pick was like, okay, if Caminero's not there, maybe I'll take Vientos.
Yeah, right.
So I don't think I would have felt bad at all had let's see, you you took Lewis. Had whoever took Vientos, had they taken Caminero and Vientos been the name that fell to me, I would have been like, okay, I'll take him instead. Although it turns out you would have grabbed him, and then I would have gotten neither, and then I would have been sad. So I think those 2 guys, but I think you're right. You hit a sort of an end of a group there where like the next 2 third basemen who went were Matt Chapman and Alex Bregman, who like they both could be good. They both have been good, but I don't trust Chapman year to year. And if Bregman's not in Houston, even if Bregman is in Houston, I have some concern. But if he's not in Houston, he could be a mess for fantasy. Because those Crawford boxes are a lifeline for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the next round, it's Blake Snell in the 8th. And I got to say, if you're at first pitch Arizona, once again, for 2 straight years, Blake Snell was the talk of the town of being one of those guys that I'm not ranking appropriately, they say. I don't know. You can go so many ways with it. I've seen as high as 18. I had him at maybe 28. I think I've since moved him to about 22 or 23, something along those lines. It's just because, of course, the second half is always so good. What are we going to get from the first half? Do we want to deal with the anxiety of being a manager with Blake Snell where things aren't going your way May 1st and you just have to endure for ages and just hope that eventually gets there? What's so interesting to me is that the curveball finally became a thing. And he has not gone many innings in a season that often. It's just twice with his 2 Cy Young years were about 180 innings exactly. So Blake Snell, why did you go for, say, Blake Snell instead of, say, McClanahan, Joe Ryan, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, a lot of these others that I think you're going to see the ADP probably be higher than Snell come March?
Yeah. McClanahan was the other guy I was debating there. I ended up just like, and again, this was a case where I was looking at upside more than anything else, right? So I look at a lot of the other guys that went after, and I felt like those were the 2 guys with the most upside, and I basically decided I thought Snell was the safer of the 2, just because McClanahan coming back. We'll see. I really like McClanahan, but that was why I went with Snell. I think, yes, the second halves are often better, but he's put together, like I said, he has 2 Cy Young years, right? Like I know that they weren't a ton of innings, but he has been an elite pitcher multiple times, and he was again this year, is just only in 100 innings. I think he's going to correct his big mistake from last offseason, which is he will sign a contract before spring training starts, and he'll have a normal start to the year. And that doesn't mean that he'll be great right out of the box, because he hasn't been. But I do think he'll end up with something that looks an awful lot like what he's done the last 2 years, but over 180 innings instead of 100. And that's going to be a pretty elite pitcher. And we get back to the fact that, again, this is a head-to-head league. So if he's just sort of a middle-of-the-road starting pitcher for me for April and May, and then kicks it into gear in June, July, August, I'm happy with that. That works for me here. So
yeah, hopefully that works out. I'm going to go after McClanahan just because I feel he's healthy and he is absurdly good. I mean, he was like a top 5 starter when he was last pitching. It's a healthier elbow now, and I'm also someone that is favoring Tommy John guys like DeGrom and McClanahan, for example, because I think that they have a healthy elbow as opposed to guys who at any moment could not have a healthy elbow.
Right.
And maybe that's a flawed argument, but I am leaning that way at the moment.
There does seem to be, like, when people talk about this honeymoon period after the Tommy John surgery.
Tommy John honeymoon, exactly.
It's real. And McClanahan, look at, like we talked about before, most of my leagues are keeper leagues. McClanahan was a major trade target for me this year. As I said, a lot of my leagues went sideways. They didn't go great, which meant there was a lot of rebuilding. And to me, he was an ideal trade target in rebuilds, because I was like, I think he's going to be like, what did you get him? You got him probably around 20th in this draft. He was SP 20 in this draft, something like that. And I think he easily could be a top 10 starter. Easily. I just happen to think the same thing's true of Snell.
Sorry. So this is a fun thing. My audio keeps going in and out, and I'm having a great time. I hope all of you watching live are. That's why I keep going down underneath and pull it back. Okay. So moving on here to your 9th round, and I gotta say, I really like this one. It's Luis Robert Jr. This is going to get a seal of approval from me. What an amazing pick in the 9th round. And I think a lot of people are missing the fact that Robert Jr., A, could be traded before the start of the year, and B, it's a morale thing. That was the worst team in MLB history. And you can see actually that he was doing well for a bit, and then he just stopped caring. And I think that's a huge thing that we forget about, is that how good a team is affects the performance of its players.
Yeah.
And Luis Robert Jr. just didn't care, but the skills are amazing, Chad.
Yeah, it's funny because if anyone who listens to Keeper Cut at this point is like, Chad took Tatis in the first round, and now he's taking Luis Robert, because, like, I have not been high on these guys. He just fell so far that I, like, even as someone who wasn't particularly high on him, like, it just got silly. Pete and I had this whole debate on an episode, and I can't remember where exactly we were looking at where he'd be taken, but it was definitely this, like, Pete was trying to argue in favor of him, and I was against him. And he was like, I just don't get it. You don't think he's a top 100 guy? And I was like, whoa. I'm out on Robert, because I think he's going to be, like, I think people are still seeing him as this elite outfielder, or potentially elite. Not, like, yes, he's a top 100 guy. And so when I got to my 104th pick and he was there, I was like, well, this is easy.
Yeah, this is dumb. Yeah, right. No, I'm with you. I think it's pretty clear. I don't think we need to say too much more about this. He does have elite home run and stolen base threat. I think also if he really turns it on for a new team, you can see that average go way up as well. He's a real stud. But in 9th round, seal of approval from me. Good job. 10th round, when it comes to closers, Mason Miller is who you went for here. A couple things on this. One, I personally don't think that the Athletics, which you can't say Oakland anymore, it's ATH is their abbreviation, that Mason Miller is not going to be a starter. He's going to stay as a reliever. That's at least how I think. I think if I'm Mason Miller, I want that too, because you just had a healthy season and you are so well regarded that you are going to be of value if you can stay there. Did you have a plan here for a reliever that you wanted to get someone at a certain point, or did you follow the old, I don't know who to take, so I'll take a closer mentality?
It was a little bit of that. It was also, I had my list of closers, and I knew I wasn't going to be one of the people to jump in early and get, like, Clase or Helsley was the next one off the board. And so I was just sort of watching that list dwindle away, I guess.
Yeah.
And there had been over the 8th and 9th rounds, there had been 4 closers taken. It was Diaz, Williams, Hader, and Raisel Iglesias. And I think Miller, Duran, and Munoz, who all went in the 10th round, like I could have been happy with any of those 3, but then it got real iffy for me.
Right.
And so I had a little bit of a like, I'm not really sure what I want to do here. Nothing is jumping out at me. Maybe it's the right time to grab a closer, and felt pretty confident that if I didn't get one of those 3 there, I was not going to get one of them. And so I took the plunge. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're going to keep him at closer. I do think someone when I was talking to Pete about this, he was like, "Well, are you worried they're going to make him a starter?" And it's like, if they make him a starter, he'll be a starter.
That's good too. Exactly. That's a fantastic point.
I don't mind him there in either role. So
now, did you feel that the hitter pool around the 10th round or so, was there a certain, I guess I'll put it this way, is there a certain point of this draft where you felt that the options for hitters really started to fall off?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it was almost earlier than that. I think, and maybe this is I don't mean to be unfair to Zach Neto, because I really like Zach Neto. But when that pick happened in the 7th round, I was like, okay, that's where we are in the draft now.
Yeah, sure. I get that.
And the guys like,
7th round taken by Hacks and Jacks, Scott Chu and Joe Galena.
And so, Scott and Joe, if you're listening, like I don't dislike that pick. I think it was a good pick there. I like Neto. I was hoping I would get him actually. I was a little frustrated because actually when I took Snell, Neto or Tovar were both on my radar.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because you don't have any infield save for Caminero and Naylor, so you need the middle infield completely of shortstop.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit because I did have another name on my list that I eventually just jumped at. But yeah, I did at that point start to think like, I don't know. There were a couple of outfielders still left, but other than outfielders, there wasn't a ton. And I had started the draft outfield. So I wasn't super anxious to add another outfielder. So like, I still like Butler. I like Elliot Ramos. Bellinger, I think will be fine. And obviously I took Robert there, but then, it just sort of is, I don't know. There's guys coming up in the next couple of rounds, like Jake Berger, who I said I would have considered if I didn't already have a third baseman. I took a hitter in the next round, but we've run out of guys that I'm like, yes, I want this guy and I feel good about it.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. So I totally get that. And that's actually kind of why I craft my strategy a bit, because as you're saying, really once you get to Neto's, that's the end of the 7th round, it kind of ends. So great. I got to go for 7 rounds then and get that, because to me, the pitchers are still there in the middles of rounds here. In the 8th round and later, you have Yamamoto, you have Fried, Grayson Rodriguez, Bailey Ober, Nola. I mean, Justin Steele, Jared Jones, Alcantara, Ryan, like so many quality pitchers where you're not really going to feel like there's a giant gap between that one that you would get in the first 6 rounds. While then you have a lot of hitters that are a massive gap, I think. Austin, so you have like Riley Green versus Colton Cowser, for example, between the 5th and the 11th, right? I mean, that's to me a showcase of it right there. Say Suzuki versus Rosarena, or Josh Lowe, Nick Castellanos. There is a big difference. Santander versus Bellinger or Julio Ramos. It's like, you want Santander. It's a huge gap. So. It's something to think about if you are going with Chad Young's strategy, which I'm not saying is the bad one. It's just, it was 3 starters in the first 6 rounds, and it put you a little bit in the situation of, okay, great, how am I going to figure out hitting? And we're going to figure that one out as we go here. But you did go for a catcher, Cal Raleigh, in the 11th round. And Cal obviously had a phenomenal season, tons of home runs, RBI as well. Do you think he's going to replicate that again in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think Raleigh at this point has, like, his last 3 years, he's hit 27, 30, and 34 home runs. I'm gonna pencil him in for 30 home runs from my catcher slot. And from my catcher slot, he could do almost nothing else, and that'd be fine. I also don't think, and I know Seattle's a terrible place to hit, Julio Rodriguez is not going to be as bad next year. I don't think that offense overall is going to be as bad next year. And so I think his runs and RBIs will go up. He is going to hurt my average. He did steal 6 bases. That was not something I even living in Seattle and regularly going to Mariners games, I did not realize that he stole 6 bases this year, but he did. So
Yeah.
yeah, if he's going to give me 30 home runs and throw in a couple of stolen bases and I think have some pretty decent. I mean, he had what did he have? He had 100. He had 73 runs and 100 RBIs, and that offense stunk. So
yeah,
I feel like those 3 categories alone are going to make him a very, very valuable catcher.
Right. What's also interesting is this idea that the batter dynamic had changed in Seattle. If you didn't know, 25% increase in strikeouts at T-Mobile Park this year, which is really massive as a part factor. And it could explain Julio Rodriguez. It could explain pretty much the entire Mariners offense. And the fact that Kyle Riley still hit 30 bombs this year is something to be said. If they do remove that, or if they do change it, so it's not as favorable for pitchers, well, obviously we have to say something about the Mariners staff, but also that the hitting could get better. So Kyle Raleigh in the 11th gets a seal of approval from me. It is so rare to have a catcher that you're like, yeah, I'm really cool with this. And I know that it won't be like waiver wire, I don't know. In the 11th.
One other note on Raleigh. Yes. He played 153 games and got 628 plate appearances.
That's huge. I mean, they needed the offense, right? He would play DH. So,
but that's not going to change.
Yeah,
so
it absolutely is not. So I love that pick there. We're going to go to the 12th round where he took 2 more pitchers. We'll talk about that after this break. So we have Hunter Brown and Seth Lugo. And by the way, it's like every 5 minutes, this thing my speakers just start buzzing obnoxiously and you start warbling in sound. It's just for me. It's terrible. But if you see me disappear, that's what's going on. Okay. This is why you got to watch the live streams, guys. And on YouTube as well. We have every single On the Corner podcast on our YouTube channel. So go check that out and subscribe to it. You have Hunter Brown and Seth Lugo as your 2 pitchers back-to-back, 12th and 13th. What drew you to these guys? They're traditionally volume arms, and you already have 4 already. You could have continued to go with hitters, but you said, you know what? No, I'm going to go after these 2. Talk to me about Hunter Brown and Seth Lugo, Chad.
Yeah. So Lugo, yes, has become, I guess, a volume arm, right? I mean, he was a reliever not that long ago, so it's like weird to think of him as a volume arm. But his first year as a starter, his first year back to being a starter last year at 146 innings and put up 206 2/3. He's also just been really good for like 350 innings over the last 2 years. And I think, you know, a lot of times, and this, I could be accused of this with Sale. We sometimes get into like name recognition, brand, like guys have a brand. And you're like, oh, Sale's an ace. I can go get it. I think Lugo has a little bit of a reverse brand thing where people are like, he's just like decent pitcher who's a converted reliever.
Yeah, it's the Joe Schmo effect.
Awesome this year,
as John Metzler would call that. He was awesome. Well, he was awesome for like the first 6 weeks, and then he was really good, if that makes sense. It was like a 3.6 ERA with a 112 WHIP and 21% K rate, I think, from the middle of May onward. Which is good. I mean, that's like, if you'll take that all day and more, my impression of Seth Lugo is you will find that kind of randomness on the wire. I don't really think you're going to have this kind of performance again from him, really squeezing out so much from his curveball with a sub 30% ICR, not just the righties, but the lefties too, which is crazy. And everything else that he did from the 8 pitches, which is really just 2 sets of 4 because there were 2 different arm angles. Was really just to try to get strikes with other things that aren't the curveball, right? For Seth Lugo. And I don't know if that's really going to be as effective. It's going to be fine. I don't think you're going to drop Seth Lugo the entire year, Chad. I'm not saying that he's that kind of player where it's like, oh, you're just going to hate this. I would say the value or like the impact that Seth Lugo makes doesn't make him someone that I want to go for this early, personally. I don't think you're going to drop him, though. So take that as you will. I think the pool of pitchers means that you can take far more risks than settling for a Lugo. But yeah, it's very possible he just does this again. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
Just getting rid of Seth Lugo, please.
I also think like the biggest challenge with him is he doesn't pile up the strikeouts, but having taken Cease and Snell and Sale earlier.
It balances your team. That's good. With Hunter Brown, it's a little different. Talk to me about Hunter Brown.
Yeah, he is another like this may be my keeper league bias, but like I'm always looking for young players who are showing improvement. And his second half FIP was 2.75 this
Oh
year.
man, you said FIP. I love that. instead of his FIP.
Am I
I
supposed
dig
to
it.
say FIP? I always say
I
FIP.
just always hear people say FIP. It's
I don't know.
yeah,
I think it's because it's an ERA. We don't call it his era.
yeah,
So
it's true. I get it. Sierra. Do you say SIERA?
I call it Sierra.
Ah, Chad.
See, it's too many. It's too long to say SIERA.
Do you
That's too
say
much.
XFIP or XFIP?
XFIP.
Okay, sorry, it's 5. 5 is the max.
It's super inconsistent, huh? Yeah. His FIP, FIP, whatever you want to call it, like he made big improvements, and it was mostly on bringing down his walk rate. His strikeout rate did go up from 24.9 to 25.5%, but his walk rate from 9% down to 7.6%. And for me, you see a pitcher who's like pushing 10% walk rate, over 10% walk rate. I start to get concerned. I did take Blake Snell. I still start to get concerned. But he had a 12% walk rate in March and April, 12.2%. And then brought it way down, and it was 6.7% for June, 6.3% by the time he got to September. And so just to me, he looks like a young pitcher who is figuring things out and improving. And it's not like he needs to improve very much on what his overall season was to be good.
Yeah. So it's funny, actually. Hunter Brown and Seth Lugo were 2 of the 4 guys I had to be the focus on for First Pitch Arizona in the pitching panel. I remember looking at this going, I don't want to talk about these guys. But Hunter Brown, I'm encouraged by, because one of the molds of a pitcher that I really try to target, and at some point I should just kind of outline like who these are. It'd probably be really helpful for everyone. But it's the guys who have a floor that is worthwhile with also, and that's a volume floor. So like every 5 days goes 6 innings, who also have a ceiling that's above a 25% strikeout rate. It's like a 25 to 27 is the ceiling. Hunter Brown is that. What's interesting last year is if you try and tell me what his arsenal is, you can't, because it changed and it's weird and he doesn't even know what it is on a given day. I saw games where he was just sinker heavy and whatever, stop the 4-seamer. I saw games where it was just 4-seamers, no sinkers. I saw games where he was focused on his secondaries and his sliders and his cutters. It was all over the place. And obviously we have that 9 earned run game against the Royals where he was horrible. I'm like vomiting in my mouth because it's just, sorry for that image, I apologize. He was just throwing everything in the middle, and he couldn't throw a single thing that wasn't either in the middle or far out of the zone. All of his fastballs were just such bad misses, and he had to throw a curveball, and it would just be a hanging one because they knew that the fastball was easy to take, and it was so bad. He after that though, far better. He also transitioned from a slider to a cutter against the lefties, and that was so much better. Huge deal in that transition. Saved sinkers more so for righties. There is also a decent amount I like with the extension in the 4-seamer, and that it can be more than it is. Biggest hesitation I have about Hunter Brown, though, is he doesn't really have a trusted second breaker, that is the slider or the curve, to get whiffs with yet. It's almost there. It's just not quite consistent. Like, okay, cool. Now it's coming up the slider. Deal with it. He's not quite there yet. And the 4-seamer is not as consistent. And having so many pitches is a good thing for Hunter Brown. It allows him to adapt in a game. And so I do give him an extra, I pull back the pendulum to the middle for that reason. Like, you have so many pitches, but also you don't really have the greatest command of all of them. But he's young. It's a good situation. I like taking Hunter Brown. I think he's actually a really good pick for you. So I'm going to give you, oh no, I can't. I'm sorry. The other guys I went after are just too good. I mean, they're all like the same thing, but no, you take Jaron Jones all day. Your team, though, you took Sale, Cease, and Snell. I get that. All right, I'll give you seal of approval. Yeah, okay. I'll give it. No, just looking at your situation, I get this. Yeah. Well, seal of approval is not just a, whew, that's a, yeah. So you've got 3 so far. Robert,
well,
it
was just a few because
Callan.
You were going back.
Oh, yeah, I was going back and forth. Is there anyone else that's, I mean, I like Shane Baz more, but that's just me. All right, so yeah, those are those guys there. Anything last you want to talk about with Hunter Brown? Cool. No. We're gonna go to your final. Oh my gosh, your final. You're finally going to tackle your middle infield. and it's Bo Bichette and Bryce Terang as your second base and shortstop, not in that order. And Bo Bichette had a horrific year. I mean, talk about one of the greatest falls of a hitter from first 3 rounds to the end of it. I mean, it started, I guess, in 2023, but then it really hit this year. And I totally understand. You're at shortstop. You're in a 12-teamer. You're not really trying to find the guy you stick the entire year with right now. You're just trying to find something that you take a shot with and be ready to move on to something else.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like I've spent so much time looking at what happened with him, and I have no answers, none. And I think that is both reassuring and scary. Like if it were like, oh, his strikeout rate is suddenly 40%, then it'd be like, well, he's done. Like I get it, but it's really not super clear to me what has undermined him. And so at this point with this pick, this was just maybe he's still a top 3 round kind of guy and just had a atrocious year. And sometimes you have those years you just have to be like, yeah, that happened and we're moving on.
Right.
And I don't really know how else to interpret his year. And so at this point in the draft, I was like, you know what? And it's honestly, it was even earlier than this. So I talked about before that I had a shortstop in mind. Like I wanted Neto, he was gone. And then I started watching this list of shortstops and had sort of at a point where it's like, I could take Volpe, I could take Bichette. And I was just sort of waiting to see if one of those 2 guys would go away. And then I would take the other one. And I eventually was like, forget it. So I ended up being the one who made the choice, and Paul picking right after me took Volpe. But I just hit a point in the 14th round where I was like, anybody who is my starting shortstop at this point is a guy who I might drop if somebody more exciting comes along in April or May. Mm-hmm. And there is at least a chance, it may not be a good chance, but there's at least a chance that I'm looking at this pick in June and being like, wow, people really let me do that?
Yeah, right. Exactly. No,
and at this point in the draft, I'm always looking for those kinds of picks. That kind of pick where like, if I can look back later and be like, why did nobody take this guy like 6 rounds earlier? Because the reality is in the 8th round, you could have looked at him and been like, well, that's kind of crazy, but he would have gone after Neto and Tovar. The only other shortstop who went between those guys and Bichette was Jeremy Pena, who I'm not excited about. Like, you anywhere in that range, you could have said, fine, forget it. I'm taking a shot on Bichette because the upside is just so far beyond what anyone else brings right now. So yeah, why not?
Nice. So I totally get it for both of them. I mean, I don't really, I probably would have chased Jackson Holiday, I think, who went to pick the round later. He's at second base right now. But as far as Bichette and Terang's skills go, Terang obviously did well early on in the year. And then as the season went on, I believe it kind of took a step back. I need to double check it right now, but my whole computer is just being weird and it's great. No, I mean, I take this back. He has no power. He's all speed. And decision value did get worse in the second half. A lot for Terang. It's not really exciting from anything but speed for Terang.
Yeah. I don't love that pick. I really like when Holiday went 2 picks later, I was like, yeah, I should have just taken Holiday. Like it just instant regret. And as I'm looking at the draft board now, I didn't have the draft board up before, but the other name that was in this consideration for me when I was watching Volpe and Bichette was Matt McClain, who went right before I took Bichette. And I had all 3 of those guys as like, okay, we can see maybe one of these guys will be my middle in, fit my middle infield somewhere. McClain went, I took Bichette. Yeah, I should have taken Holiday, or I should have waited because I could have taken Gleyber Torres a round or 2 later.
Yeah.
I honestly I think Andres Jimenez, if I was going to just go for speed, I think Jimenez he doesn't steal as many bases as Terang, but I think he's a better hitter. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would have had more upside with him. Yeah, I think Terang was not a great pick.
Can I
get a seal of approval for recognizing that Terang wasn't a great pick?
I mean, I think that's great that you say that. I made picks that I don't like either. But yeah, I think Torres is just the better one. And I think it's really, I mean, I know I say this every single podcast, every single time, but you got to have a plan at second base. You got to have a plan at short. It's like every single one of these positions, you have to figure out the targets, because I do agree that there are just generally ADP should follow the scarcity and should have the understanding of, if I get this one over here at this position, that means this one over here at this position. There generally should be the same gaps of value. It's not the case. It just doesn't happen like that. So, for example, like at second base, it's Mookie Betts, Marte, Albies, and Altuve in the first 3 rounds. And then it's like Semien and Luis Garcia Jr., Stott and Xander Bogaerts and Nico Horner. Like, what? Hold on. This just got so much worse so fast. So if you don't go after one of those in the beginning, then you're going to have to deal with this. But then again, you missed on other guys. It's a tough thing to figure out. And that's why we do these mocks, is to get a sense of where the targets are, where the gaps are, and where the hot spots, as Ariel Cohen would call it. We've got other guys to talk about here, like Jordan Romano in the 16th. I really just did not go after closers because I didn't really want to think about it. I want to go after everything else. But I was like, fine, Nick, you have to be honest here and try closers. So you went with Jordan Romano in the 16th. He didn't have a good season, but you think he's going to bounce back for the Jays?
Yeah, he was unhealthy. Like, he had injury issues, and I there's obviously some risk that he's just unhealthy.
Right.
But I wanted my second closer, having taken Miller earlier. I wanted either Bednar or Romano. I figured both of those guys would fall, and both of them are too talented to be as bad as they were again.
Sure.
And Bednar went at the top of the 16th, and so I grabbed Romano. And again, this is a case where, like, I would have been happy with either of them, and I look at the guys after them, and it's like Alexis Diaz, who I don't know if he's going to find it. Jason Foley, who maybe he's the closer. He wasn't in the playoffs, so I don't feel real good about him being a closer. And then you're getting into speculating on like a Porter Hodge, Ben Joyce, AJ Puck.
Right.
I like those guys. I don't know. I have found in my head-to-head leagues, I either am going to go get 2 guys I'm confident are closers, 2 or 3 maybe even, or I'm going to just ignore the position, because speculating in a draft on guys, like, it's just, you speculate on 2 or 3 guys who might be closers, and even if one of them hits, then you're bad at saves. And you've got, like, it's just not, you need them all to hit, or it doesn't do you any
right.
good.
So that's what happened in my legacy league. I got Helsley and Robert Suarez and Raisel Iglesias, and guys just get lucky like me. That's all you need to do.
It does happen.
Right. So I mean, I think come the start of the year, there is more clarity in certain positions and certain skills. And I think you're right. Generally go for the skilled closer. If when you're in doubt, just go for the one with the highest strikeout upside, really. And you should more or less be okay. You have some more of the guys. We have about 7 rounds left. We're going to go quickly through them. Before we do, we have to take a quick break. Taylor Ward, 17th round. I love this pick. Such good process plus throughout the year, tons of power. The Angels have to score some runs somewhere, and Taylor Ward's likely going to be in the middle of it. Chad,
do they have to score runs?
Yeah.
Are we sure they have to score runs?
Yes, they have to. Yes.
I think it's a super boring pick that people sort of ignore. And they shouldn't, because he's good. Like, he's been consistently good. He's a good baseball player. He just is. And if he weren't, like, he's been in a weird situation where he's both been on a bad team and overshadowed by his teammates. Right?
Yeah.
Like, usually these, like, you get a guy who, like, oh, this team is terrible, and the only reason we recognize how good this player is because he's the only competent hitter on this team, or something like that. Or you get a guy who's like, we underrate this guy, but it's just because, I don't know. Like, I think in some ways people, like, underrated how good Teoscar Hernandez was this year, because, like, you had Shohei and Betts and Freeman, and, like, he's just not the top guy on that team.
Right.
And Ward, for the last few years, has been in this weird situation where it was Ohtani and Trout, and then Ohtani's gone now, but you still have these mega stars above him, and so he sort of fades into the background. He's not super visible, but he puts up good numbers because he's a good hitter. And so
he's just a solid hitter, and I dig this, finding something that is productive like this in the 17th. I generally like to go the philosophy of, you want to make sure one util and one outfield is open. This is a 3 outfield league, also 2 Ohtanis here. I didn't clarify that at the top, but I like to think that the outfield position and the utility spot are the two easiest to fill. Really, it's outfield.
Yeah.
So you want to ensure that you have a lineup that you like early on. But if there's one that there's one place to fill, it's not really your infield positions. It's outfield. There's 36 and 12 team, and that's really
Yeah.
opens up the door for it. So I see a lot of people going for outfielders later on as more of the offensive guys, and it makes sense for like your util is going to be an outfielder usually, at least one of those two. So it makes sense with Taylor Ward. It's I think he's better and more and safer than the other choices, but there are others like Jordan Walker, Jason Dominguez, Pico Armstrong, Willie Abreu, Roman Anthony, Chase the Lauder. Like these are more high ceiling potential out
Yeah.
of spring coming in hot, and versus Taylor Ward, which is, I mean, he's like a Toby of hitters almost. Of like you're gonna have him there, he's gonna be fine. Like you're gonna be cool. I have this helps, and you're not hurting from this outfield spot necessarily, but you ideally want to replace this.
Yeah.
What was your decision here by going for Taylor Ward instead of the other? Instead of just like, is your thought process here of like not chasing upside here, or is it more just safe, productive, call it a day?
Safe, productive. I mean, if you look at my outfield, I went Tatis Acuna in the first 2 rounds.
Well, the juniors, all 3 juniors.
Yeah, and then I got
Oh my
Rivera in
gosh.
the 9th. And like, if you told me in September that those guys were 3 of the top 10 outfielders in fantasy, I'd be like, yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah,
And if
right,
you told me they played 150 games combined, I'd be like, yeah, that unfortunately also makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have a guy that I was just like, if and when one of these guys misses time, if
That makes
Acuna's
a ton
already
of
missing
sense.
time,
Yep.
I can plug him in. He could stay on my roster all year if he needs to and just produce for me.
I really like this next pick too. It's kind of funny because you are wearing your Cleveland Guardians hat. If you don't know, Chad Young is a big Guardians fan. I meant to mention that with the Josh Naylor pick, and you have Manzardo, who is his replacement. I don't know. DH swapping back and forth between him and Naylor, but Manzardo looked really promising in September.
Yeah, I mean, he was up early in the year and got, I don't know, 90-ish plate appearance, something like that, and struggled. But even then, like he had 3 or 4 really awful games when he first came up. Like his first few games, he was striking out a ton. Like everything was terrible. And then he got better. It still wasn't good, but he got better. He brought the strikeout rate down. He looked a little bit more. He looked like he was settling in, but he still looked pretty uncomfortable. They sent him back to the minors. He comes back for the month of September and has a 147 WRC plus in the month of September. He was hitting for power. He had 5 home runs in 69 plate appearances in that month. He's a prospect with a ton of talent in the bat, who seemed to show up and get comfortable, and then goes into the playoffs and is arguably better than he was in September. It was only 19 plate appearances. They sort of protect him a little bit, but like high stakes games against elite bullpens, and he was often coming in to face tough pitchers. He was excellent. So yeah, I think this is a guy who is ready to break out. And at this point in the draft, like he can be a util guy for me. If he has to start the season on the bench as he's, settling in or whatever, fine. And yeah, now I'm in the same position as the Guardians, where if I decide at some point to trade Josh Naylor, I can just put Manzardo in.
Yeah, there you go. No, I like that pick a lot. I think it's a really good one. I also like the next one, Jordan Lawler, which is essentially you're just chasing upside for the shortstop position if Bo Bichette doesn't work out.
Yeah, between Bichette and Terang, my middle infield is risky. And so I did feel like I needed to get some upside there. And Lawler to me feels like, because of the injury and stuff, like he just feels like a guy people are forgetting about.
Yeah.
He was an elite prospect. I think I called Manzardo an elite prospect. Manzardo was a very good prospect. Lawler was legitimately an elite prospect, and that talent still exists, and the opportunity should be there.
Yeah. I mean, he triple A here for Lawler, like hasn't really seen, I don't think he's made his debut yet, if I remember correctly. In only 12 games this year in triple A. Got hurt as well, I assume. I'm just seeing that he has like I don't know, like 30 games total
Yeah.
this past year. So hopefully he does. I would say that Lawler might take some time because of that injury to actually be in that position, but maybe they just make a quick pull on him to come on up. We are going to go to Luis Severino now with the Mets. And I think when it comes to the end of the draft, when you're targeting pitching, this is volume. This is something that you have something out of the gate in Severino. I don't know if Severino is still a Met. I got to remember this. I think it was a 1-year deal, but it could be wrong.
He's a free agent.
About Luis Severino. But talk to me about this pick here as you're in the 19th round. Or 20th round,
he's not a Met. I mean, he may be a Met again, but he's not a Met as of this moment. He'll be somewhere. He made 31 starts and threw 182 innings, which it seems crazy to be like, hey, at least there's a guy I can slot in that first week for sure. But that's suddenly who Severino looks like at the moment. He was also really good down the stretch. His last 8 starts, he had a 3.17 ERA, a 3.56 FIP FIP. He seemed to be getting stronger as the year went on, which, given his injury history, makes a ton of sense, right? That if it would take him a little while to shake off some rust, to get himself back into shape, to be his best self. If his best self looks more like what he was doing in August and September than what he was doing over the course of the season, he becomes not just a guy who I can count on at the beginning, but has the potential to stick in my rotation all year. And if not, so what?
Yeah. I totally get that. I'm more inclined to chase. I want to think the last 2 roster spots for pitchers on my team are the burn and churn. Something I like to say a lot is that me being in on DJ Hall and AJ Puck was obviously wrong. And also because they pitched early in the first couple days, I was able to swap them both out and get something else, which early in the season was things like Eric Crochet or with Flaherty or Houck or etc. So it is important, I think, to ensure that you're ready to drop. But Severino could be on a team where he goes opening weekend. And another part of my strategy a lot is to target pitchers opening weekend, so you can have players who you can assess instead of assessing off of the wire. And if there are guys that you're thinking is a number 5 starter or number 3 or 2, getting Severino would say cool, you can assess that this is real first, and then you have them. And then you can say, you know what, I'll take a chance on the guy who hasn't pitched yet, is often a thing. So Severino, not necessarily that kind of guy, but it could be.
I think the off season will tell me a lot about actually not just Severino, but the 2 guys I took after him.
Sure. Oh, that's we'll get to that one. But just a quick hit on Severino. He's a fastball sinker guy now, with changing more of his slider into a sweeper. Weird to me. He is a lower arm angle though, so 4-seamer isn't as extreme to the sweeper as is Nick Pivetta with a super high arm angle, and then lower on the sweeper, making that obvious to see. Is not as obvious for Severino. I am always wanted the cutter to come back for Severino. I think that's the pitch that he should be using more so than the sweeper. But he is making it work decently. It was better than I expected for Severino, but wasn't the ceiling that I think a lot of people were hoping for from him this year. And I kind of just see him. Yeah, he's a Toby moving forward, but you could get some value out of this. It could be hot from out of the gate. So I get it. We'll see where he lands. Ryan Mountcastle, love this one. For the Orioles, first baseman, it's just a good utility bat. Solid. Should be in the lineup a lot. It's a solid offense. At least it was for the first 3/4 of the season for Baltimore. Should be a good offense next year. And Ryan Mountcastle should be a part of it.
Yeah. I also think there's they have some shuffling to do if they're going to make room for guys like Mayo and stuff like that. And Mountcastle is a reasonable trade candidate for them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's later in his years of control than a lot of the other guys. And so they aren't as long-term reliant on him. He's a terrible fit for that ballpark.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that's also part of my thinking here is I'm going to take a shot at him, and maybe he's not in Baltimore next year and he's at literally any other park.
That one. Yeah.
So if he doesn't get traded, he's a fine util bat. And if it's not going well, because like this year wasn't great, if it's not going well, then I just
move
dump
on.
him for something.
Yeah, there you go. He's going to be a guy that's going to be on many teams this year, right? The what is it? The transaction, like the foreign currency, as in like he's going back and forth as you convert to other teams. But yeah, I mean, these are the kind of bats, rather. I'm so used to saying arms. The kind of bats that you plug them in, and you don't really love it, but it's like you're getting to the finish line with them. Last two here are two upside candidates. The first one's they're completely different in my view. Tobias Myers throws 93 with really good IVB on his four-seamer, and pairs it with a cutter that is fine in the zone, not much of a slider or curve, and then actually there is a slider in there, but it could be a lot better. It's more like a strike pitch. And then you have this changeup that has so much potential, especially with his great IV before seamer. Everything that he does is just he cannot command the dang thing. But it all kind of worked together. He was like a 120 whip, but a sub 4 ERA is about 3.5 or so, if I remember correctly, maybe 3.2, 3.3. And
his ERA was 3
for more. Yeah,
his ERA was 3.
Just exactly 3 it was. Oh, that's fun.
Exactly 3.
Exactly 3. I take back the sub 4 comment. Well, I wasn't wrong, but that's not what you think. It was almost sub 3. Tobias Myers shouldn't have the same result on that. The four-seamer ICR was very good, and I think it's weird, but it's also one of those times where throwing a lot of four-seamer strikes and then having a lot of things around it kind of look similar, make that four-seamer look even better when you get strikes with it. We've seen this before from other guys. I think it's a fun pick here. What are you looking for in the spring to make you feel as if, okay, cool, I'm holding on to Tobias Myers. I feel like there really is a breakout coming.
Yeah, it's less. I don't know what I'm going to see in the spring, to be honest. I think part of it is I want to. So this is for me, even as a writer and a podcast host and all that stuff. One of my favorite things about the off season is I get to let people who are smarter than me write about players, and I get to read about them. And I don't consider myself sort of an expert in pitcher analysis, and so like. I'm really intrigued, like what you have to say about him, what Eno has to say about him, what like people who know more about this. Like I think I'm going to learn a lot about him in the off season. And so right now at this point in time, I was like, he was really good last year. I should probably take a shot at him and see what's up. Realistically, if this were March, I would have done a lot more. There'd just be more information out there for me to digest and sort of make decisions based on. I don't know that we're going to see a ton from him in spring that's going to change things one way or the other, because I think we have a decent sense of who he is. What we don't know is how consistently who he is can churn out the results it's been churning out. And so I will learn more about him in April for sure.
Right.
And so he is another guy who, like, I think he's going to be one of the early starting pitchers in their rotation. And so I should have a chance to, like you were talking about before, see him that opening weekend, see what's what, and move on if I need to.
So here's the thing. Your last pick, seal of approval. Because I mean, I remember even thinking about this, and I in my head, I thought, no, he's not going to be posted this year. It's next year. But no, he's going to be posted, it looks like. And I'm already seeing, because of course they are, the Dodgers are heavily favored to land Roki Sasaki, which is just not fair.
No,
like,
it's not. It's totally unfair.
I mean, come on, don't do this.
This is
but
where
you got him with your last pick, and I'll be honest, you're going to see him in the top 10 picks, probably top 10 rounds. If he is certainly going to the Dodgers, it's not even close. I remember even thinking to myself, man, there's going to be a international pitcher that I'm going to get. Like, I got Imanaga last year in the 20th round or something. And Roki Sasaki, we've all been like, well, yeah, he's amazing. And you got him in the 23rd round. I mean, there's not much more.
Like, no, this was just a case where like other people just clearly weren't thinking about him. Like,
I did, but wrong. How about that?
Okay. There'd been enough. I will say this: there'd been enough smoke around a possible posting this year that And we did this draft a couple of weeks ago, right? So this was before he turned down the offer from the Marines, and before it became sort of like, I think at this point everybody is like, oh yeah, it looks like he's getting posted.
Right.
I for sure was like, if I had been that confident he was getting posted, I would have taken him many rounds earlier.
Yeah, I think everyone. Yeah,
I hit a point
even
now
still,
where
you should have taken a chance anyway in the last round, of course.
No, that's the thing, and that was the thing. Is like at this point in the draft, I was like, my 23rd round pick is probably not going to be on my roster through the end of April, anyways.
No.
So
go, everyone listening right now. Look at your drafts from March of your teams while you still can, and really take an assessment in your head about the guys that you not only still had on your rosters through the end of the year. Look at the ones that you still had May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, August 1st, September 1st. If you can look at that, you'll see how much of your draft is not the team that you have and how quickly it turns over, like so fast. So really plan around the bottom 5-10 rounds of your draft about, I do not expect this to last, and really go for quick decisions as much as you can. Roki Sasaki is the perfect quick decision of, it's not even health. It's just, is he here or is he not?
Yeah.
Great. I want him. No. Awesome. I have that open spot before even the season starts. So I this is such a good pick, and I hate that I didn't do it. And I'm super jealous. And there you go. I should have taken him instead of Andrew Painter in the 17th round. There you go. I don't even like Andrew Painter now. So I am just incredibly jealous. But Chad, that is it for this draft. Now, a couple things. First question, what strategies did you learn from this that you're going to change moving forward?
Yeah, I think interestingly, even just this conversation with you has told me I'm higher on some starting pitchers than others are, which means I can actually wait a little bit longer on starting pitching and still like, it sounds to me like
pitcherless draft, I should say, guys. It's a popular strategy to wait on pitching inside the pitcherless staff.
Yeah, and so we'll see how things play out. But one thing that I will be watching in ADP is like, I'm obviously higher than you on Sale. I'm higher than you on Snell. Like, if that's going to be the case, if I'm going to be the high man on those guys, I will wait a little bit longer, knowing I can get them later.
Sure.
Because I'm high on both of them. As we were talking through this, and I was thinking about my middle infield, I did have this moment of, instead of Sale, I should have taken a middle infielder, and I could have pushed Sale back around. And honestly, like, even Gilbert, he was the last. Like, I took Gilbert.
I like Gilbert is pretty much, unless you're going for an injured guy like DeGrom, McClanahan or so, or Ohtani the pitcher, then Gilbert's the next one up after all those guys are taken.
Agreed. But so in the 4th round, there was that run of Burns, Reagans, Crochet, Gilbert. No other pitchers went before my next pick.
Oh yeah, that's right. George Kirby, Imanaga, Michael King, Garrett Cole.
They were all after that. So I realistically could have gone after like, I was like, oh, I could have taken a middle infielder instead of Sale, taken Sale instead of Gilbert, and still gotten Gilbert. Or if Gilbert got taken, I take Kirby, I take Imanaga. I'd be I could live with that.
Yep.
But what middle infielder was I going to take instead of Sale?
Right. I mean, that's the thing.
Next middle infielders off the boards were Adames, Abrams, and O'Neill Cruz.
Yeah.
I don't really want any of those guys in the 3rd round.
I took Ketel Marte in the 2nd round and the middle of it, just because I can't not. And then I took Corey Seager in the middle of the 3rd, because again, I don't want to play this game.
So I think if I'm looking at this now and I could play this back, I think I can make a case that I should have taken Lindor over Tatis. And then I would have had, or Betts, actually, either one of them. Phil A. middle infield.
Probably the one that I think I'm leaning toward.
Yeah, I literally just went to the next one who was on the board.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Betts was right after. But yeah, I should have taken I should have taken one of them, but I don't know that I like that either. So I think like, I'm really struggling to look at this draft and say, yeah, that's the point where there was a middle infielder I should have grabbed and I didn't. Like, I'm fine with the Tatis pick. I could maybe make a case that I should have taken Neto over Caminero in the 7th. But then after that, like,
Yeah, no, it gets dicey, and it's gonna be something we're gonna be talking about through all these episodes. On a scale of 1 to 23, Chad, how would you rank your team?
So 23 is like I'm going to win this league. Everyone else
Yeah,
is
there's no
just
question. I nailed this. Yeah.
yeah. I not 23, and it's not a 1. It's somewhere in between. I would say I feel pretty good about it. I think I have a pretty
Mhm.
strong. I feel very good about my rotation, and I think my offensive strengths are enough to buy me time to solve middle infield
Yeah.
if my middle infield isn't
Sure.
panning out. And so I'll call this like a 17,
Yeah, sure.
18.
That's the expected answer. 17. And last question I have for you is, what pick did you like the most that was not on your team?
What pick did I like the most that was not on my team?
Yeah, the best pick that someone else made in this draft.
Um, Boy,
And
there
guys, remember, of
were
course, everybody listening right now, you can check out the draft board below. Also, make sure you sign up for PL Pro. We have a lot of really fun things coming, like the PL dashboard, which we have more to share soon for your next season. And of course, all my early access starting pitching rotation articles. So use promo code podcast to get 10% off PL Pro yearly for the next year. It's not the season, it's 365 days. So you get all of next season and the early starts of next off season. And plus, of course, all the preseason content we'll have just for PL Pro users. So that's promo code podcast. Go to pitchers.com/premium and sign up today. Chad, what do you got?
so I promise I'm not just doing this to kiss up, but in the first few rounds, there were 2 picks you made where I was like, oh, if that guy had been there, I probably would have taken him.
Oh,
And
nice.
one of those was Corey Seager, who you
Yeah.
just talked about. I really like, as much as I said I liked Sale, I would have taken Seager over Sale.
Yeah. I mean, that was to me, it was like the last remaining shortstop that was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
jealous of that. And then Riley Green. I'm a
Yeah,
big
he
I
was really killing it now, and watching
yeah.
him as a like, I would watch pitchers going against the Tigers, and the Riley Green at bat was always so difficult.
I am.
That was
I'm
so
going to get
fun.
myself. Pete and I talked about this in the last episode too, because I'm getting myself into trouble in a couple of leagues because I'm high on Green and I'm high on Parker Meadows and I'm high on Kerry Carpenter, and I liked some of the things I saw from Spencer Torkelson, and I thought
Yeah.
Colt Keith was making some moves, and it's like I have like. Pete and I were going through auto new arbitration for one of our leagues, and I literally have all of those guys on that team. And I was like, I don't want to give up any of these guys at the price they're
Yeah.
at, but I also don't think I want the entire Tigers lineup to be my
Right.
team. Like that
Right.
doesn't seem good either. So, but the Green's a fun one.
Oh, well, I appreciate that a ton. And it was, I mean, also to me, looking at the outfielders available, I felt, I was hoping to get Mike Trout, and that got sniped. But Santander would have been the next one I would have gone for. And then
Yeah.
Christian Yelich is fine, James Wood fine, Seiya Suzuki fine, Ian Happ. I really feel like Green and Santander were the last 2 de facto outfielders to me, and I felt
So
really lucky getting Green then.
let me throw one thing out there on Yelich,
Yeah.
which is everybody is like, oh, he's having back surgery, all this stuff. He's having a surgery to repair what's been a chronic issue for him.
Mm,
And I think people are. This is not to say, by the way, that you should be taking Yelich as a first round pick, that he's about to have the best year of his life or whatever like that.
sure.
But I think people are more focused on he's having back surgery and less focused on there's a real chance that he is feeling better now than he literally has any time in the last 5 years. And
And
I talked to
yeah,
Pete about this on our show, that the surgery he's having is very similar to a surgery my dad had years ago. My dad is not a Major League Baseball player, but my dad spent years dealing with back issues, had this surgery, and like was fine and has never had issues again.
and I do want to
And
mention that Yelich's ability last year, not one of decision value, contact value, power, were under 100 throughout the entire year, save for contact slightly in the beginning.
Yeah.
A really good season over about 75 games. You've sold me on this already. I didn't realize this, so I'm going to put him inside of that first 5 rounds now. And then James Wood, I mean, that's just really fun. And of course, that's Fantasy Feud, who I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk with tomorrow, actually. Shelly
Nice.
and Sarah Sanchez, Shelly versus Straight, of course. But Chad, can't thank you enough for being here. And remind everybody where they can find what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you including me in the draft. People can find me on Twitter at Chad Young. I'm also on Blue Sky at Chad Young, but I don't use it. But follow me there. If enough people follow me, maybe I will use it. You can find my writings over on Fangraphs, mostly writing about Auto New, and then the Keep or Cut podcast on Twitter at Keep or Cut. It's cut with a K. Pete Ball and I talking about keeper leagues, our own little sort of niche of the world in between dynasty and redraft. And
it's wonderful.
It's my favorite niche to be in.
Auto News is great. Of course, Niv Shah,
Yeah.
A former staffer here for about 2.5 years at Pitcherless. Amazing. And obviously the founder of Auto New as well. So go check out Auto New. If you're looking for that perfect league with your friends, it's Auto New, guys. You're trying to design Auto New. I actually designed Auto New myself. Like started doing, I'm like, oh wait, this is just Auto New. I'll just play Auto New.
It is.
But all right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And Chad, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you. That's going to do for this episode of On the Corner. Enjoy all the mock draft podcasts. You can go find them also on the site. This is the first one. You're not going to see one right now, but if you're listening to this late, you can go and find all of those in order. Just go to the podcast and On the Corner. You'll see all the previous episodes there. But that is it. So my name is Nick Pollack. And may your babs be low and your strikeouts high. I guess that's what I do when Eric Samulski isn't here. Bye-bye, everyone.